coming. We're so pleased to welcome Emily here. She's now living in San Antonio and has created this wonderful body of work. And she's going to talk with us a bit about its conception, what she was thinking about it, and then we'll respond to questions, and you can ask her afterwards. But we do welcome you. We will be publishing a catalog that will be available in about 3 weeks. So check back. This is a really good, wonderful essay exploring her work that Wendy Outwell has written. And we'll have image pictures of her work, and it'll be a very nice thing to refer to. Remember this. So join me in welcoming Fleisher.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be part of the 37 years of the history of this gallery. Thank you. And thank you to Liberty for installations, as well as all the volunteers and interns and assistants who came through last week. They're all very talented, and they helped all this stuff together. And I guess I would just speak very briefly about the work, and I can talk about maybe one in particular. All of my work, I use, ordinary objects that are usually deeply embedded in like monotonous daily routine, and I try to eke out something of the phenomenal hidden within. A lot of these objects are containers for one thing or another, whether it's a frame that's sort of a container that holds an image or painting, or the telescope. The telescope I think of as a container sort of for our virtual selves. We stand on one side of the telescope and we look out at a very distant point, and the telescope sort of shrinks that distance, so it kind of transports us through space towards that object. And I guess a lot of these objects are also related to personal memory as well. Specifically with the telescope and with this pasta box, I used pastina pasta, which I've realized in the past year or two is virtually non-existent here in Texas. But if anybody's Italian or from the Northeast, you'll know pastina. It's in the pasta aisle right next to spaghetti, and it's the tiniest pasta shape that's produced. It's a teeny tiny star, and usually you give it to kids as a first food. You put it in soups. My mother made it for me when I was a child. She'd mix it with cottage cheese, and this is one of my favorite treats. And I've tried to give it to my son, who's 5 now, but he would not eat pasta. It's the only toddler who would not chow down on noodles, but we'll have to try it again. So I like this connection. So I used the pastina and sprinkled it over various surfaces and spray painted black spray paint over it to get sort of a photogram. So I like this connection between the overly familiar and the sentimental, used to illustrate something that's so distant, remote, and inaccessible. So I think that's a main theme among all of these works. And if you have any other questions, I can go on about everything. Please let me know. I can go further in depth.
Can that be hung on a wall?
Yes, it can. This is another piece that's kind of delves into this idea of the routine. If anyone has kids, I guess as soon as I had a child, I learned what routine is, and so part of the routine is bath time. And I had the baby, I'm talking about him too much. The baby who screamed when he touched the water, and it's how the screaming reverberates and echoes within the chamber and the bathroom. And then later on, when the screaming stops, it's the rigid plastic toys that get thrown around, and they knock into the tile walls, and then they get thrown out of the bathtub, and it's like this, the crash and then the clatter across the floor that just echoes into eternity. And I'd wear earplugs a lot of the time because the sound is so intense. So I thought about creating like the gentle landing, the gentle soft landing of the toy within the bathroom landscape. Do you have any other questions?
Can you talk a little bit about nature escaping from these containers?
I guess that started with this. I had done some small pieces using this green material, which is flocking, and it's used for model railroad materials. I live in San Antonio. We have a hobby town, and there's this huge model railroad department, and these guys are my best friends now. They love it when I show up. And so I used these for some small pieces, but it was just like evoking a landscape and like the most boring, like painted, this would be the most boring painting ever, but it's like, the interest for me was about it escaping the frame, and I used it for a couple of these pieces. The wheelbarrow was the last piece that used that, which was also related to specific event. We had gotten like 5 cubic yards of dirt delivered to our home, and we were filling in some garden beds that we made. So, you know, when you use a wheelbarrow, you have like the enormous effort of multiple shovelfuls like going and depositing the soil into the wheelbarrow, and then you like heave the wheelbarrow to where you're going and dump it. But then when you dump it, it's like a tablespoon of dirt comes out. And so, you know, we were doing this like all day, and then at some point you just kind of look at the mound and you see like you've barely made a dent in it, but then the capacity of the wheelbarrow looks immense, and then the dirt that you actually moved is like minuscule. So like I couldn't reconcile like that circular relationship between like quantity and mass. So then I just thought about the wheelbarrow that could, I don't know, not to be cheesy, but like move a mountain, but like move like a substantial amount of earth.
Did you build that wheelbarrow? Did you make that?
Yeah, I made the wheelbarrow. It's laminated plywood and bent metal. So, yeah.
But when I see your work, what I notice is we're just talking to other people is this element of fun. And I'm curious, because you've spoken about your son being a big influence, if the fun has always been a part of your work, or if it was motherhood entered your life.
Hopefully the fun has always been there. And then it got less fun for a while. So I think that's the trajectory.
I love how you handcrafted all of these tile pieces. Could you talk a little bit about how you choose to make these by hand?
Sure. I guess everything is reprocessed, even though I'm using familiar objects. That's the only found object, the book. But it's, I don't know, as you process things through your hand, it like takes on another quality, which is part of my interest. So these are, we had a gutted bathroom, which I destroyed last year. And then I bought hexagon tiles, but I had been working with these tiles for the past year. I decided to use like white hexagons. So I took a mold of the tiles that we used, and then a latex mold, and then cast several thousand, I guess, out of plaster. And each piece had to be like carved down a little bit because they come out of the mold a little bit funky. So they all fit directly into place. Except my bathroom doesn't have black tiles, it's just white. So this is also like the, I guess the kind of flooring that I grew up with. I live in a suburban development now in San Antonio, so, which is about like, our house is like 30 years old. So this is like kind of speaking about a different time period that I'm more used to. And actually the timber piece, the green, that's actually a map of my neighborhood. All of my streets are named thematically with like the first word is timber. So it's like Timber Canyon, Timber